lift up my eyes to the mountains. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Psalm 121, 1 and 2.
The year was 2007. My husband, Michael, and I had been living in the state of California for a couple of years at this point, and I was teaching junior high school at a K-12 Christian school. And over this last couple of years, I had picked up on some conversation about our high school biology teacher taking some of our high school students on this big summer trip, and I was intrigued. Now, Michael and I had begun the conversation of expanding our family beyond just the two of us, and so I knew that if I was going to do any kind of big, physical, epic journey, the time was now. And so I went up to said high school biology teacher, and I said, "You wouldn't by any chance happen to be looking for a female adult to tag along this summer, would you?" And he said, "Why, yes, I am." And so before I could even think twice, I signed on to chaperone 12 high school students on a 5-day, 40-mile hike through the high Sierra Nevada mountain range. Yeah, so here's the deal. I grew up here in the Midwest, where our idea of a mountain is like a really great sledding hill, all right? I had never done anything like this before in my life. I had never done anything this intense. I had never hiked that many miles. I'd never been in that high of elevation. I had never carried a 25-pound pack on my back. But I was 100% confident I could. I love camping. I love hiking. I love the mountains. In fact, anytime I've ever played the game, Would You Rather, there's always that question, would you rather go to the beach or the mountains? And I always say the mountains. So basically, I was born for this. But just to be sure, our guide, our biology teacher, he required every single one of us to go on a shakeout hike about 6 weeks before the Big Sierras. And we would go to a state park all together where we would hike up a mountain that was just over 10,000 feet. And we knew that the hiking we'd be doing in the Sierras was well over 10,000 feet, but this would give us a taste of what we were going to do. And we understood the bigger picture here. Like, if you cannot do that, you will not be going on this. We got it. The message was clear. So that day we showed up and we got to our practice mountain, and I was so excited. And really, ladies, I think that's what drove me those first couple of miles. I was just really excited. I had a lot of adrenaline. But then, oh boy, those switchbacks. You know what I'm talking about? Those paths that just go back and forth up the mountain. That elevation gain came quick. It was a lot harder than I anticipated. And it did not help that my entire group, all of those high schoolers, plus the biology teacher, who was like 3 times my age, ran right past me up the path and left me in the dust. But there was one student, there was one young lady, and she was really lagging behind. And it was so unfortunate for her. But it was great for me because I could stop and catch my breath whenever I needed to. And I'd just say, "Y'all go ahead. Bless her heart." I'm just gonna, right, okay. Well, this student and I, we slowly made our way up. We hiked many miles, we hiked many hours, and we finally got so close to the top. We were just within a few feet of that final ascent to the summit. And it was only just a wee bit discouraging when all of our group came running down the summit. And I called out to one of the boys and I said, "Are you guys already done?" And he said, "Already? We've been up there for like 2 hours. We took pictures. We ate our lunch. I took a nap. Yeah, we're done." And then to add insult to injury, our leader came down after them and he said to me, "You know what? You can just turn around and start going back down. I'm sorry that we stuck you with her. We didn't mean to do that. And I'm real sorry you're not going to get to see the top. But we'll just go on down." I said, "Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm just here to serve, you know. Totally just back here 2 hours behind you because of her. And also, I'll see the top another time. I do this kind of thing, regularly, so it's fine." Ladies, I was not just a little bit nervous at this point, okay? The whole point of the shakeout hike was to shake out any students who could not hack it, and I legitimately did not hack it. And I wish that I could tell you that it was so much easier going down, but apparently, you use a whole different set of leg muscles to go down than you do to go up, and apparently, I don't use those muscles very often. Because by the time that I got to flat ground, I looked like a car wash blow-up guy. I'm just like all over the place. My body was shot. And so when our leader said that night, hey, we're gonna have a debrief time. And if you want to not just survive this hike, but actually enjoy it a little bit, I have a few principles that you should know. Oh, you better believe I took notes. So here's what he said. Principle number 1. Every ounce counts. He said, do not try to carry more up that mountain than what you were made to carry. Yeah, we're gonna be up there for 5 days, but you should pack more like it's 2. Nobody should be carrying more than 25 pounds on their back. If you try to carry more than you were made to carry, it will break you. Every ounce counts. Got it, boss. Principle number 2. He said, you are not alone. Now, first of all, he wanted us to know this. We should not be hiking alone. It's dangerous up there. We need to keep somebody in our line of sight at all times. There's bears, there's snakes, there's rolling rocks. But secondly, he said, you're not alone. You don't need to carry all of the burdens alone. There are things that we share. Pots and pans, first aid, extra water. So share the load because you are not alone. Check. And principle number 3, lift up your eyes. He said, do not get so laser focused on the tiny little pebbles at your feet that you miss the expansive beauty all around you. Don't think for a moment that this journey is about what you can do. It is all about opening your eyes to what he has already done. So lift up your eyes. And that was it. We all went home. Now, the kids went home to eat pizza and play video games for the next 6 weeks. I went home to get a gym membership. I want you to go ahead and open up your Bibles with me, if you would, to the book of Psalms. Now, tonight, we are specifically going to look at Psalm 121 here in just a little bit. So if you want to open that up and have that at the ready, that'd be great. We're going to look at a few others in the meantime. And here's what I want you to know. This weekend, we are going to go on an epic journey together up several mountains. Biblical mountains, spiritual mountains, emotional mountains. And as we traverse these mountains together, we're going to be studying something called the Psalms of Ascents. And so for our time together in this session, I thought it would just be really helpful to introduce you to these Psalms, to introduce you to their significance in history, and also to their significance to us. And so to do that tonight, all we're going to do is just ask some simple introductory questions. And here is the first one. What are the Psalms of Ascents? I'm so glad you asked. It's a great place to begin. And to start, we're going to go all the way back to the days of Moses. In the book of Deuteronomy, we see God instructing his people, the Israelites, with these words. He says, 3 times a year, all of your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose. At the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Okay, so by the time that these Psalms were written, that place that God had chosen was the temple in Jerusalem. And so every year, Jewish families from all over the region, they would make this journey to Jerusalem 3 times. They would go for Passover, the celebration of the Israelites being rescued out of slavery in Egypt. They would go for the Feast of Weeks, a celebration of the new harvest, and they would go for the Festival of Booths, a time commemorating the 40 years that the Israelites wandered in the wilderness. And the name, the Psalms of Ascents, this is significant. There are 15 Psalms in this songbook, Psalm 120 to Psalm 134. And they were traditionally sung by these pilgrims as they would go on this journey to the temple. And that word ascent, it is a literal physical title for these psalms because the temple sat atop a mountain in Jerusalem. So no matter where you were traveling from, even if you were coming from up north and you were coming down south to Judea, you would still ultimately have to ascend to get to Jerusalem, to get to the temple. But this term ascent is also a spiritual word, because a lot of these travelers would be returning to Jerusalem after a season of trial, after a season of hardship. And so they're coming back to the temple to look for encouragement and to be lifted up. In fact, if you read through all 15 Psalms in succession, Psalm 120 to 134, you might find what a lot of scholars have pointed out, that in Psalm 120, it's almost like you begin far from God, carrying heavy burdens, wondering if God will actually meet you there. Listen to these words from Psalm 120. It says, "In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. Deliver me, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. What shall be given to you, and what more shall be done to you, you deceitful tongue? A warrior's sharp arrows with glowing coals of the broom tree." I mean, yeah, you can see it, like they're going through stuff, right? But as you journey physically closer to the temple, you also journey closer to God himself and to his presence. And so by the time you reach the 15th Psalm in the songbook, 134, you're there, you're with him, you're trusting him. Listen to the contrast in these words. "Come, bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who stand by night in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands to the holy place and bless the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion, he who made heaven and earth." And so the Psalms of Ascent, that title, Ascent, that really means something, but so does the number 15. Now, there were 15 steps on the temple in Jerusalem. And so there's a lot of historical accounts that show that the Levite priests would come out of the temple and they would stand on these 15 steps and they would sing these songs of ascent, almost like a welcome invitation to the sojourners as they made their way to the top. But that's not all. In Hebrew, the word yod means 10 and the word heh means 5. And of course, those numbers together do equal 15. But also those words together, they form one version of the name for God, Yahweh. So there's the name Ascent, there's the number 15. All of this are significant, and this is what they are. A book of 15 songs sung on their journey upward, both in body and in heart. But let's talk a little bit more about the people who sang them. So here's our next question. Who exactly are these pilgrims? Well, the directive in Deuteronomy 16 said that all males are to come before the Lord. Actually, whole families would make this trek 3 times a year because the women were also responsible to go before the Lord and offer sacrifices of thanksgiving, offer sacrifices for atonement for their sin. And so these journeys would be hard. These would be difficult journeys. They make my shakeout hike look like a cakewalk, okay? They would literally take their families. Sometimes it would take them 5 to 7 days to make this journey, depending on where they were coming from. Because if they were coming all the way from the north in Galilee, what they would do is they would cross over the Jordan River, travel down the other side, and then travel back over the river to get to Judea. And the reason why they wouldn't just come straight south through Samaria, even though that would cut off a couple of travel days, is because that wasn't the safest route for women and children. But listen, as difficult as this journey was, the Jewish people were dedicated to completing it 3 times a year because this is what bolstered their identity. For starters, they experienced encouragement on this journey because oftentimes they would do it in community. Most of these people would travel in groups. They would look out for one another. They would look out for one another's children. They would share meals and share supplies. They would help those who had physical barriers and needs. Community was key in this journey. They knew they were not alone. But secondly, it reaffirmed their identity as God's people, the nation of Israel, the chosen ones. And third, it reminded the world of the sanctity of the temple and of Jerusalem. This place was and still is, even though the temple is no longer standing, it is a sacred place. And so this is who they are, faithful followers of God, doing whatever has to be done so that they can be in the presence of God. See, they might have sounded a little bit unfamiliar to you at the beginning, but maybe they're not as unfamiliar as we thought. And so here's the final question. Here's the final question I want to ask. What are these pilgrims carrying? What loads do they have with them? Well, naturally, they're going to be carrying physical items up the mountain, right? They're going to be packing for 2 weeks of travel, plus a few days in the city themselves. And many of them are packing, again, for a whole family. Food packs, clothing packs, way more than just my 25-pound pack. And we know how this packing goes, don't we, ladies? We've been there. We pack our clothes, the kids' clothes, a jacket for everyone. We charge all of the devices. We make a game bag and a toy bag and a medicine bag and a snack bag. We arrange pet care and lawn care and make sure that the in-laws know where we're going. We clean out the fridge so nothing goes funky while we're away, and we sweep the floors just in case we never come back and we don't want the neighbors to think we're slobs. We do all of that. Meanwhile, our husbands pack his clothes, goes and fiddles with something in the garage for an hour, and then comes and asks why we're not ready to go. I'm just joking, I'm just kidding. My point is, there were probably some pretty distinct differences in what was packed, but I imagine the packing process still came with some lists, still came with some stress, so it's not all that different. But one of the packed items that would be very different was that these pilgrims would be carrying with them sacrifices. Remember what Moses said in Deuteronomy 16, "They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed." Every pilgrim or group of pilgrims was required to offer certain sacrifices for peace offerings, gratitude offerings, festival offerings. And so they would typically bring with them a bull or a ram, a sheep or a bird. And they would also bring offerings of wheat, oil, and wine. Actually, we get a real life kind of in context picture of what this would look like in a Bible story that I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with, the story of Hannah. Now, Hannah was a woman who was barren for many, many years. And this was a deep shame for her to carry, a burden that was horrible in that time and place, and it still is today. But she also carried another burden because she was taunted by her husband's other wife, who had many sons and daughters. And we read Hannah's story in 1 Samuel chapter 1, and it tells us that year after year, Hannah's husband would take her and her rival and her rival's children, and they would go up to Shiloh to offer sacrifices to the Lord. And this one particular year, Hannah was in the temple, and she was so overcome with emotion. She's just sitting there weeping. And the priest, a man named Eli, he came up to her, and he thought she was drunk. But she assured him, "I'm not drunk. I'm just broken." And so Eli blessed her. She left, and the Lord heard her cry, and later that year, she gave birth to her son, Samuel. And when the boy was weaned, this is what Hannah says. It says in verse 24, after he was weaned, she took the boy with her, as well as a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord. As surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And he, Samuel, he worshiped the Lord there. Now you can see the sacrifices that she carried with her, the bull and the flour. But you can also see her carrying some other things. Things that are not visible to the eye, but are quite visible to the soul. Hannah was carrying blessings and burdens. The blessing, well, obviously her son, right? I mean, the last time that she was in Shiloh, she was childless and she prayed for a miracle. Now she's back there again, and that miracle is right beside her. But the burden, also her son, because she had promised the Lord that she would return her child to him if he would just bless her with the gift of being a mother. And those are heavy loads to carry to the mountain. much heavier than clothing or food packs or even sacrifices. What's unseen is often the heaviest load that we carry. And here's what we know to be true. Every ounce counts. And the pilgrims sojourning to the temple, they knew this too. Many of them are carrying blessings up that mountain, blessings abounding. We can see it in the songs that they sing. In Psalm 122, it speaks of gladness and giving thanks. Psalm 124 is a song praising God for his rescue of them from the hand of their enemy. 125 sings of the strength of the Lord. 126, even though it's a song lamenting time in exile, they still speak of joy and hope because they know that Zion will not be moved. 127 rejoices in the glory of family and a home built on the Lord's faithfulness. 129, another one rejoicing at the mighty hand of God against their enemies. And 133 sings of the beauty found in unity with other believers. So many blessings. But these pilgrims were also carrying burdens to the mountain. Psalm 120, as we heard before, it speaks of desperation and deceit and depression. 123 cries out to God, begging for mercy because they have been objects of scorn and contempt. 124 and 129, I said, they rejoice over God rescuing them, but that rescue was needed because their enemy nearly devoured them and they were afraid for their lives. And in Psalm 130, it says, out of the depths, I cry to the Lord. See, our psalmist knows that redemption is real, but he is waiting and waiting and waiting. And that waiting gets heavy. And so the pilgrims, they are carrying their blessings. They are carrying their burdens, but there's something else that they're carrying with them. They are carrying expectation. Every single one of them. Because with every step that they take and every song that they sing, they know they are getting closer and closer to the place where they will come and lay down their blessings and lay down their burdens and simply behold. In fact, these songs were sung on the way in anticipation and in preparation for the worship that they would be a part of when they got to the holy city. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know if any of the other Psalms of Ascent quite capture this expectation better than Psalm 121. So let's look at this together. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. He's your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. The Lord will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. See, whether a pilgrim has come into this journey in distress, like in Psalm 120, or with joy and elation, like in Psalm 134, every single one of them will garner strength for the days ahead from the same source. It's right there. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord. Sisters, I want you to answer that question with me tonight. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord. His eye is always on us. He will not let us fall. He keeps us from all harm. He keeps us from all evil. He keeps us forevermore. And it's with that in mind that these pilgrims carry on in their journey, in the hard and in the good. They continue up the mountain, for they know that is where they will meet the maker of heaven and earth. That is where they will meet the Lord. Well, the 6 weeks between my shakeout hike and the high Sierras went pretty quickly. I won't lie to you. And we all met in the high school parking lot that day where we had a couple of drivers that were going to take us up to our base camp. And then from there, we'd be on our own for the week. And when I got to the high school, I saw that our leader had a scale. And he was weighing everyone's packs. Now remember, we weren't supposed to carry more than 25 pounds. I put mine on the scale. Whopping 32. Shoot. I remember him getting in my face and asking me this question: do you really think that is sustainable? Do you really think that you can carry all of that up the mountain? And I said, listen, I tried to pare it down, but I believe I need everything in that bag. And he looked me dead in the eye and said, you're wrong. He proceeded to open up my pack, dump it out in the parking lot in front of God and everyone, and went through all my belongings. He threw out a whole set of clothing, an extra blanket, a big tube of sunscreen, aerosol is lighter, and then he took out my toothbrush and began sawing off the handle with his pocket knife. I said, what are you doing? And you know what he said? Every ounce counts. He whittled away at my stores until we got my bag down to 27 pounds, and he seemed content with that, and so we went on our way. Well, we made it up to our base camp, and that night we sat around the campfire and we swapped stories, and we just talked about how excited we were for the days ahead. And do not get me wrong, I was so nervous. I was nervous as all get out, but I really was excited. Because I knew that as hard as this journey was going to be, it was going to be so worth it. The first couple of days were not so bad. And we did hike about 10 hours every single day, so it was intense. But we had a kind of a slow incline so that we didn't notice the rising elevation too much, and we did all the things we were supposed to do. We kept each other in our line of sight, we shared the weight of the extra burdens, we did all the things. And then came the day that we were to summit a 14er. The stunning Mount Langley is the 9th highest peak in the state of California at 14,026 feet. But I was not distressed because the trailhead for the summit was already at 10,000 feet. And so in all actuality, we only had to climb another 4,000 in one day. And I felt like I could do this, right? The thing is, they were 4,000 vertical feet. And so for the first couple thousand feet, I just put my head down. I found a doable pace for myself. I took stops when I needed to. I took a breath, but not for more than a minute, and then I got back on my way. I just kept telling myself, I can do this. For the next 1,000 feet, however, I began to question whether or not this was a good idea. All of my team, of course, had passed me by a long time ago. It was fine. I came to terms with it. You do your thing, okay? But I did start to come up with stories. I came up with about 14 different ways that I was going to die on the side of this mountain, and no one was ever going to find my body. I felt like one story for every 1,000 feet was appropriate. Then for the final 1,000 feet, I just cried. I cried the whole dang way. I had blisters on my feet because apparently my feet were moving around in my boots in a way they had not previously. I had blisters on my hands because I was gripping my walking stick so tightly. I had blisters on my ears because I did not realize the higher you go, the thinner the air and the more the sun cooks you. So by the time I got to the top, I was despairing. I met up with some of my team members right before the summit, just a few more feet to go. And they had not summited yet. And so when we met together, I was able to get some bandages from our leader, and I was able to share my water with a young man who had run out. And I remembered the beauty of our second principle in that moment. You are not alone. And I thought to myself, we couldn't do any of this if we were. We stayed there together just long enough to pound a peanut butter sandwich for fuel, and then we made that final ascent. And I remember coming over the ridge at the top of that mountain, and I was feeling so many feelings. I was exhausted. I was dehydrated. I was in pain. I was weepy, partly because I actually just did that, and partly because of all the aforementioned things. And then as I stumble over the edge, the first person to see me was one of our high school boys, and his jaw dropped, and he announced loud enough for the whole mountain to hear, "Mrs. DeFazio, you actually made it?" So then I just felt mad. Like, slow down there, Skippy. Of course I made it. What's wrong with you? And it was with all of these feelings swirling around inside of me that I stumbled up to the edge. I dropped the load that I had been carrying. I lifted my eyes for the first time all day, and I could not breathe. And not because there is no air up there, although that is painfully true, but because I saw the Lord. I saw the Lord. It took me 8 hours to climb up that dang mountain. And I was despairing in more ways than one when I got to the top. But I gotta tell you, when I stepped out of the shadows into his glorious light and I beheld him, I knew that every painful step was worth it because he is worth it. He is always worth it. Now, ladies, I want you to imagine with me what it would have been like to be one of these Israelite pilgrims, these Jewish pilgrims, making this trek to the temple in Jerusalem. You know, you probably started out early morning on your journey. Maybe you were all alone. And you walked till about midday until you joined up with another traveler. And now you're swapping stories and you're sharing supplies and you're making this journey together. And then the next morning, you join up with a whole crowd of sojourners, and together your whole group is excited. You begin to sing together, and you think, wow, this is fun. Because when I started out yesterday morning, I was all alone, and I was just kind of humming these psalms that I've known since childhood. But now, your voice has joined with another voice, and then another, and then another. Harmonies intertwining with melodies. And pretty soon it's just this one big, fervent, passionate chorus raised to the heavens. Can you picture it? Can you imagine it? How sweet the sound? I think you can. And I think you will. Because that is exactly what we've come here to do this weekend. Maybe some of you left your home this morning alone. And you thought to yourself, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to go to this thing? But you got here. And maybe you ran into someone in the parking lot. Maybe it was in the lobby, but you saw a familiar face and you felt welcomed in. And now you're here sitting in community. And can I just say, we're glad you're here. And maybe for others of you, you've been planning this with your posse for a long time. You had no intention of coming alone. There's a whole crew of you, and you cannot wait to shoot them all in laser tag. We're glad you're here. Maybe for some of you, it's been a really long time since you have been able to lift up your eyes. Honestly, it's been really difficult to just put one foot in front of the other, so you're sort of surprised you even made it through the door. Glad you're here. And for others of you, you have been so excited about this, you could probably just run all the way to the top right now. And we're glad you're here. We need your energy. But here's the deal. No matter what it took for you to get here, and no matter what it is that you brought in here with you, the invitation is the same. We are here to lay it all down. Lay down the blessings, lay down the burdens, and just behold him. And so tonight and tomorrow, as your voice mingles with the voice next to you and the voice next to her, and the melodies intertwine with the harmonies, and we lift up a beautiful heaven-bound chorus together, we want you to remember a couple of things. First, remember who every word is about. And then also remember this. We don't sing just to announce our sorrows. We sing to meet them with transcendent truth. And so right now we invite you to lift up your eyes and behold the one who is holding you. Would you stand and let's worship our King together?